And we live. Peace, peace. Greetings to you all. It's your brother Naheem, a.k.a. Lord Abba Sheikway L, Mr. Just the Facts. We got my brother Ware L, a.k.a. Dr. Logic. We got my brother Josh Gray L. Tonight, we're going to talk about the recent ruling that that the Supreme Court handed down in Byron Allen's case versus Comcast. We're no legal experts, so we want to put that caveat out there and that disclaimer out there. We're just trying to expand the conversation a little bit and bring awareness to this case, because this case is based upon the 1866 Civil Rights Act. And I want to read real quick so people can get a context of what this act entails. Okay, so this is coming from a website called SpartacusEducational.com. It's the 1866 Civil Rights Act. It reads, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 was passed by Congress on the 9th of April over the veto of President Andrew Johnson. Let me pause right there. People say Donald Trump is the worst president in the history of the United States of America. That is not true. President Andrew Johnson, the racist bigot, was the worst president in the history of the United States. Let me finish reading. The act declared that all persons born in the United States were now citizens, without regard to race, color, or previous condition. As citizens, they could make and enforce contracts, sue and be sued, give evidence in court, and inherit, purchase, lease, sell, hold, and convey real and personal property. Persons who denied these rights to former slaves were guilty of a misdemeanor and upon conviction faced a fine not exceeding $1,000 or imprisonment not exceeding 1 year or both. The activities of organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan undermined the workings of this act, and it failed to guarantee the civil rights of African Americans. So anybody that knows the history of the KKK and the Night Riders and all of these different groups, I believe the Red Shirts were one of them as well, know that they were basically quote unquote white Christian terrorist organizations who got together because they were going to enforce their own set of laws. This 1866 Civil Rights Act, it is so important. And the fact that Byron Allen is standing on this case in his lawsuit shows that, and if you listen to any of his interviews, you'll see that this man is not just fighting for his company. He's fighting for what's called black media today. And without the support of all of our people, all of us, which is why we're doing our part in trying to bring it to what's called the conscious community today, so that we could try to expand this discussion, because if they violate this right, who knows which rights of ours that they'll violate. We're going to get into the case. I'm going to read a couple of notes. I'm going to read an excerpt from this book, The Color of Law. My brother Ware L, my brother Gray L, they're going to go in. So I want brother Gray L to just come in real quick and give us some context of what happened today from your perspective, and how this ruling was unanimous when you had what's her name, Ginsburg and Sotomayor, who were appointed by, I believe, Obama. And then you had the other two that were appointed by Clinton. I forget their names. I got it in my notes. But these are liberals that are on the Supreme Court. How is it that they could vote unanimously with the quote unquote white supremacists who sit on the Supreme Court, the racists and the bigots? I would like for you to give some context on that. And then brother my brother Dr. Logic, I would like for you to come in and break it down as well.
Okay. Yeah, man. It just goes to show you that, when you look at the arguments that so many people are making, especially the older black or ADOS boomers and pretty much the establishment Dem media, especially establishment Black Democrats, when they always talk about, well, we don't need, this is not the time to be asking for an agenda. This is not the time to be asking for reparations. This is, maybe try that later on. Let's just get Trump out. Because when Trump, as Trump stays in, he's just going to put more conservative judges in the court. So we need to get more liberal judges in there. Well, it just goes to show you that the liberal judges are siding with the conservative judges. So that's not a valid reason to make us just quiet down our demands for reparations, to make our demands for a Black agenda just to give up and acquiesce those demands. And one of the things, I'm going to share my screen here because it's interesting when you look at what the justices are saying here. Let me share my screen. Hold on, let me go back here. Share screen. Yeah. Let me increase the size of this real quick. Let me know if y'all can see this better. There we go. So in the end, this is not the one I wanted. Let me go back here. Bear with me. I think this is it. Well, yeah, this is what I want to share right here. Because it's interesting how Comcast, in their case, they actually got a favorable ruling for what they were looking for. They were looking for the motivating factor causation to be ruled as not the standard. They wanted the but-for standard to be the default rule now when in discrimination cases. So just to kind of give everybody that may not be up to speed or understand how this works. So this case was about the 1866 Civil Rights Act that was put in place to make sure that those of us who, or I guess these are our ancestors who were enslaved, they're now coming out of slavery after the abolition. And we needed some laws. This is the first Civil Rights Act in the history of America. See, we actually forced America to keep its word that it had in its founding documents. And this is the first Civil Rights Act in American history. And basically it was to protect us from being when we need to do contracts. Because think about it. If they just lock us out completely from contracting, from business, from being able to buy grain, from being able to buy supplies that we need to do farming, being able to make contracts, then they would just force us back to the plantation begging, right? So to prevent that, they put the Civil Rights Act in place. Now, what Comcast did, fast forward to today's times, Comcast is doing zero business with Black-owned media. They did a fraud. They had some kind of fraudulent MOU where they got Al Sharpton, NAACP, and Urban League basically to say that they're being inclusive. They promised to be inclusive. Well, they basically gave Puff Daddy, Revolt. They gave Magic Johnson. I can't think of the name of his channel, Aspire. And they gave actually an executive who worked for Comcast. She broke off and got her own channel as a part of this MOU. They put their executives on the board of the NAACP and the Urban League, and Al Sharpton got his show on MSNBC. So Byron Allen was like, wait a minute.
Wait, hold on. Yeah, but real quick, if people look up Byron Allen's first loss, I believe it's the first time he's Sharpton. He's saying they gave him a bunch of money in a bucket of chicken, basically to sell us out. And I believe that Al Sharpton has been doing that ever since. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, so pretty much Byron Allen, he went to Comcast. It's like, look, this is BS. There's no Black people that speak for. Tell me who is a white person to speak for all white people. Okay, so don't tell me that Al Sharpton and all these people speak for me. And so look, I'm gonna need you to cut. I'm 100% Black-owned media. Do business with me. They wouldn't do business with him, so he sued him. And, you know, after a couple of times of getting rejected, he got his case proper, and his case started moving forward. He got a favorable judgment. So they appealed and they appealed, and the ruling went all the way up to the Supreme Court, where they were trying to decide, all right, look, if you're going to be able to bring a discrimination lawsuit, what is the standard that we're going to judge this suit to make sure, to see if it can move forward? Is it going to be the but for, which means you have to prove that racism was the determining factor? Pretty much, you got to get some type of smoking gun. You got to get like an email or recording of them, or you have to prove that they didn't do business with you just because you're a Negro. That's pretty much it. And that's very difficult to prove.
Let me say, I was doing some research into the but for. It is one of the highest standards to thresholds to try to meet in law, because it is completely interpretive. In criminal law, it is not as hard to prove a but for, or what they call a cause in fact case. But in tortious law, where we're bringing lawsuits, the sine qua non, if I'm saying that correctly, the but for clause it's a really difficult bar for anyone bringing a discrimination lawsuit to settle. So this thing, that I just want to give some context as well. The Supreme Court made a ruling today, unanimous ruling against Byron Allen, and they set the standard. And now the court is going back to the Ninth Circuit. So they set a standard that the Ninth Circuit Court basically has to meet, because they have ruled in favor of Byron Allen. If my research is correct. And this is why it went to the Supreme Court in the first place. This is an erosion of our civil rights. I'm wait for my brother. I think my brother Where L just got off, but I want to say real quick that we watched the other day when Trump was giving a press conference, and he called Comcast Concast. He calls Comcast main media company, MSNBC, MSDNC, right? Because they're a blue network, as Fox is a red network. But when it came to this particular suit with Byron Allen, Trump and his Department of Justice under Bill Barr gave an endorsement, if I'm not mistaken, helped write an amicus brief for Comcast. Please correct me if I'm mistaken, fellas. And it showed us that the people we call European Americans, what you may generally call white people, white supremacy, no matter what they're beefing about, no matter what they are at odds about, will come together for our suppression. And I think that this is a very vital discussion for us to touch on. I'm praying that everybody that's listening in live, we got some listeners that's good, some live viewers that's great. I'm hoping that you all would look this case up and try to gain a better understanding of it. Brother Where L, it looked like your screen is froze. Can you join in, brother?
Yeah.
Oh, no, there you go.
I'm good. All what I would like to present today is just the conversation of how important this whole thing is. You know what I mean? Like Brother Abba said in the outstart, we're not legal professionals, but what we are very concerned with what this may mean for the rest of Black America. We're concerned on the ramifications, and we're concerned about the ramifications and the impact this might have to the Black community. So we understand that the fight for economic inclusion is paramount, and it's the end state to what Dr. King's, quote unquote, Dr. King's civil rights movement was about. The end state was about economic inclusion. It was not just about, being able to use the same restroom as white folks and eat at the same restaurants as white folks. It was about being able to access all of America, and it was about economic inclusion. And we talked about how our ancestors, when I say our ancestors, I'm talking about the descendants of American slavery, this institution that created this specific set of circumstances and conditions and produced a specific group of people. You know, we're talking about that life, and we're talking about that pursuit of justice that has been ongoing and never ending. And we're talking about being able to access all of America, and that end state is economic inclusion. And when we talk about the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which is being challenged by Comcast, it's essential and it's very critical in the aspect that it's the first time civil rights is mentioned in the Constitution, right? And it's mentioned primarily because of our work and our suffering and the things that we have fought for. So the fact that it's being challenged is offensive, in my opinion. And what they're trying to do with it is problematic. They're trying to eviscerate the Civil Rights Act, basically. And when you look at the 1981, Section 1981, I believe, is really talking about the economic inclusion aspect of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. And it is talking about economic inclusion for us because they knew that was going to be an issue, and it's been an issue. And we see even now today with a man like Byron Allen, who is laying out his case, in my opinion, perfectly on how we are being excluded economically when it comes to certain aspects of industry, especially media. So Byron Allen is a media guy, and that's where his space is. And he really highlighted how Comcast has contributed with ads and money with everyone else except for black independent media. And what's really important,
I just want to cut in real quick because, you know, we could call ourselves Moorish Americans. We follow the teachings of Noble Drew Ali. And one of the things that Noble Drew Ali said was that our press would be one of the most important things. And when we think of press, we think of media. We watch the media just give Joe Biden a whole election, basically, right? So I just wanted to add that because what you were saying made me think of that. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, so all I'm saying is, you know, Byron Allen talked about how we use the black entertainment to present a certain reality. And this is not really the case. It's an illusion. And he talked about how Comcast gave more money to Al Sharpton than they did to all black independent media that exists. And his case is very, very interesting. And I think Byron Allen and his Supreme Court case should be a household conversation. Byron Allen should be a household name. He is one of the, if not the most powerful black men in America. And we all know that, like, we household names are like, when we think about black wealth and black powerful men, we think about LeBron James and Jay-Z and P. Diddy. But Sean Combs, not Sean Combs, but P. Diddy is Sean Combs, but Byron Allen is leaps and bounds ahead of these guys. And he should be a household name, and he is actually fighting for our civil rights at this very moment in time. So I think that just having this discussion is paramount and important for us to be bringing to the forefront. And if you don't know about it, continue to stay tuned. We're going to continue to talk about it, and it's very interesting what's going on.
Definitely. We got my brother Ali Bey in the building. I just want to go in real quick, and then I'm going to bring in my brother Ali Bey. Now, Comcast, in the lead up to, there's a thing called presumption of guilt, right? A consciousness of guilt. And in the lead up to the case with Byron Allen, I forget the date that it actually was in. I should have had all of this stuff. We was actually going to push the show up until tomorrow, but then I just got hyped up doing the push-up challenge, y'all. So excuse me, and I wanted to get on the air and just go in. My blood was pumping. I'm like, let's go in. But one of the things that Comcast did that I thought was a consciousness of guilt was in the lead up to that hearing with the Supreme Court, where both sides were arguing. Comcast had put out a series of advertisements trying to show that they were a diverse company, basically, right? So, to me, I looked at that as these people know that they're wrong. They know that what they're doing to what they're trying to do to our civil rights is crazy. But I thought it was a dog whistle to what I call the boule types who cap for the Democratic Party and that particular corporate system. Your Al Sharptons, your Mark Moriels from the Urban League, et cetera, your NAACP types. So, I wasn't feeling that. And it let me know that these people knew that they were wrong. And now the Supreme Court has just basically handed our last vestige of any hope over to the corporations and the races and said, y'all have at them. Y'all can do what y'all want to do with them now.
Indeed. And to frame that, so in case people haven't been paying attention and they don't understand what's going on with the civil rights, not with the Byron Allen case and the Civil Rights Act of 1866. So what was being really decided was whether the case was going to be decided or heard based upon a but-for standard of causality or of causation or the motivating factor cause, right? Which Byron Allen case is that the motivating factor is a racial issue. It's racism, which is the motivating factor, which is why Comcast does contracts disproportionately and spends money disproportionately in an extreme way with Black independent media than it does with anyone else, right? So what Comcast wants is it to be held by the higher standard of the but-for. A lot of us don't understand what that means, rightfully so. So we're going to try to break that down for y'all today. So the motivating factor means that a motive for them not to spend the same amount of money that they do with white media as they do with Black media is a racial issue. The but-for standard basically means that racism was the only issue. So in a court of law, Byron Allen and his team is forced to try to present a case that says there was no other issue but for racism that caused Comcast not to contract properly with them. So, which that's almost impossible, right? You can't, how hard is it to prove that somebody discriminated against you and their 100% sole motivation was racism? It could be anything. You could have been ugly. You could have been short. You could have been tall. It could have been a plethora of things. But what we wanted and what we think is more fair, which really doesn't matter now because the decision has come down, is that the motivating factor piece. Because if racism was a part of any of the motivation, we think that should be submitted to the court and it should be, heard based on that standard, not the 100% but for standard. So I know Ali and the other brothers got to go in on that.
Oh, yeah, it's a difficult threshold to try to meet because, I believe it was in the 60s during the Nixon administration. I mean, they started to come up with a bunch of coded language, and that coded language is still being used until this day, which makes it even more difficult to prove the but-for standard. Brother Ali, please come in and give your measure, brother, man.
Well, I don't know what I missed other than I heard well just now, but the thing I think that was very telling about this particular ruling for me was the fact that it consists of 4 judges that were appointed by Clinton and 2 by Obama. Nevertheless, this decision was a unanimous one where all of the justices agreed, obviously, on this but-for causation piece. So to me, that speaks a lot to this sentiment of blue, no matter who, that's pervasive amongst our people with this upcoming election. You know, it kind of undermines all of that to me, and it says a whole lot, man. It says a whole lot, and to me, it really speaks to the fact that we're not wrong with our sentiments with regard to distrust of the Democratic Party. You know, particularly someone like a Joe Biden, who already has a record.
Yeah, I'm getting some.
Really doesn't
breaking up a little bit, bro.
Assets about black, and so when bring that to take. Well, maybe you could pass it.
You probably gonna have to take them off. I think it's coming in real.
Yeah, if you can hear me, Ali, come back in because your stream is breaking up real bad. But let me while we're doing that, let me give a brief. Let me go in real quick on an example of but for, right? I won a lawsuit against my Brooklyn landlord. I was living in the brownstone. This was around 90. No, this was around 2001. And so I kept asking my landlord to fix the heat in the apartment. And he just, this dude, he was an Indian dude. He didn't care. He just wanted his rent. And, I'm not ashamed to admit that we were on Section 8 at the time. And he was getting his rent. He didn't care about what happened in that place. And so we had to heat the place up with the oven. And this was a health hazard because it caused breathing issues with my son, who was around 3 months old at the time. And he got a hernia. And I went to the doctor and I spoke with a nurse and I explained everything. And I said, is it possible that his condition could have been caused by him struggling to breathe because the oven created the condition, whereas we had to heat the house? And the nurse said, yeah. I said, well, can you write that up for me? And she wrote it up. So like when you're breaking down but for, right? So it's like if the landlord would have fixed the heat, then my son would not have gotten a hernia, right? And but because the nurse wrote that note, that threshold was easy to meet. The causal clause that courts use in these type of cases, it was easy to meet. Where you got racism, where people are overtly racism, they're hiding their racism. Put it like that. They're hiding what they're doing behind coded language. It is so much harder to prove. I faced this at my job recently where I was just fired from it. I just wasn't one of them bend the knee type of dudes. And, these guys were intimidated by me. So they would do things. So I know that I can't sue for racism. So instead I'll sue for retaliation and intentional infliction to cause emotional distress. I know that a racism case isn't going to go anywhere. These people were drawing nooses in the men's bathroom. They were writing MAGA all over the place. So it was a bunch of them in that building that were racist, and everybody knew who they were. But you're not going to be able to win that case in court. And I want to read something real quick. Who pulled up their screen share? I see you, I see it. I'm going to get to that. I want to read something real quick from out of this book, The Color of Law. I urge everybody to get this book, The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. For you people that's on that do for self and we got to pull our own selves up by our bootstraps, and you don't have no understanding of what the government did to us and our people for generations, you're ignorant. And if you don't read a book like this, you're going to remain ignorant and stay spouting off white supremacist talking points. Okay, let me read real quick. It says the misrepresentation of our racial history, indeed, this misrepresentation of our racial history, indeed, this willful blindness became the consensus view of American jurisprudence. Let me expand real quick. Expressed again in a decision written by Chief Justice John Roberts in 2007. His opinion prohibited school districts in Louisville and Seattle from accounting for a student's race as part of modest school integration plans. Each district permitted students to choose which school they would attend. But if remaining seats in the school were limited, the district admitted students who would contribute to the school's racial balance. In other words, Black students would get preference for admission to mostly white schools, and white students would get preference for mostly Black ones. The Chief Justice noted that racially homogeneous housing arrangements in these cities had led to racially homogeneous student bodies in neighboring schools. He observed that racially separate neighborhoods might result from, quote, societal discrimination, end quote, but said that remedying discrimination was not traceable to government's own actions and could never justify a constitutionally acceptable, racially conscious remedy. He continues, the distinction between segregation by state action and racial imbalance caused by other factors has been central to our jurisprudence. So, I mean, basically, this what Chief Roberts is doing is he's going by these old standards. And it continues. It says, in the opinion, Justice Kennedy wrote, vestiges of our past segregation by state decree do remain in our society and in our schools. Past wrongs to the Black race, wrongs committed by the state and in its name, are a stubborn fact of history. And stubborn facts of history linger and persist. But though we cannot escape our history, neither must we overstate its consequences in fixing legal responsibility. The vestiges of segregation may be subtle and intangible, but nonetheless, they must be so real that they have a causal link to the de jure violation being remedied. It is simply not always the case that demographic forces causing population change bear any real and substantial relation to a de jure violation. So this was basically Chief Justice Roberts trying to uphold a racist policy by Justice Kennedy. So the author of the book then goes on to say, the following pages will refute this too comfortable notion expressed by Justice Kennedy and endorsed by Chief Justice Roberts and his colleagues that wrongs committed by the state have little causal link to the residential segregation we see around us. And the reason why I wanted to cite that is because the Supreme Court has a history, and I may get to some of that later depending on the time. It has a history of siding with a lot of subtle racial and racist policies that really are designed to lock us out. And this book right here expertly lays out the case. Brother, were you trying to go in on the screen share, or did you want me to play that now, or did you want me to play that later on?
I just wanted to have that pulled up, right? So I wanted y'all, it is kind of a lengthy video, but I think it'll do us justice to listen to Byron Allen. I mean, we mentioned earlier, right, how Comcast was using certain celebrities and so-called civil rights activists as kind of like cover for being like inclusive and whatnot. So like Byron, this video that I want to share with y'all is basically Byron Allen going in on the specifics and the details that kind of built the the framework for this case. And he's like exposing some of these out front quote unquote Black leaders. So we have the time, and I think it's important enough to listen to it. And
okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna play it. Let's let Great L and Ali Bey come in and add a little bit more context to the conversation.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then we'll definitely play that video clip.
Were you guys able to hear what I was saying? I know it was breaking up.
It was breaking up.
Yeah, you gotta
Yeah,
rewind it.
Okay, so what I was saying is that what was very interesting to me about this unanimous decision was that it is the fact that there are 4 of the justices that were appointed by 2 Democratic presidents. 2 of them were appointed by Bill Clinton and 2 were appointed by Barack Obama. Yet the decision by the court is a unanimous one. And I think that it really speaks to, like I was saying, the fact that a lot of our people believe in this ideology of we must vote blue no matter who, and that really it's proven in so many ways that doesn't help us. It hasn't helped us, right? So I just wanted to point that out, so that people understand the people who may be caping for a Joe Biden or whatever the case is, just because he's a Democrat. Don't think that just because he's a Democrat that means something. And I know that people like Roland Martin and others try to use voting for Democrats because they get to appoint judges in the judiciary as some kind of leverage against black people to make them feel like they have to vote for Democrats. When the fact of the matter is this hasn't helped us, right? And this is a great example of that. So Gray L, if you want to put something in, you can go ahead.
Certainly. So I mean, when I heard this, when I got this ruling, I gotta admit, I was first off, I was hurt. But then I looked at, it was a unanimous ruling, and I was just highly pissed off. I'm just thinking like, this right here just proves and demonstrates to the rest of the country and to the rest of the world that we are the bottom caste of America. Like, it's like, when are we going to get the wins? We can't, the Supreme Court has ruled against us to the point where, I don't think people understand how damaging this type of ruling. And you think it's such a nuanced decision and a nuanced interpretation of the law. But really, what it's saying is, if I'm a racist, and I'm in power, I'm in a position of power, whether I'm a hiring manager or some executive, or I'm a business owner and I have influence over who I want to contract with or subcontract with, I am more emboldened to act on my racial animus. I'm more emboldened to be a racist, right? Because I have less fear that there's going to be retribution through the law, and we already are at the bottom. 13% of the population, 2.6% of the wealth. Now with this recession, we probably less than that. We might be 2% or 1%. 90% of Black America only has. Look, let's put this. Let me just give you some quick figures. We talk about this all the time, but just to break it down, the bottom 50% of Black America, is worth less than. It's not even worth one single quarter combined. Matter of fact, it's in the negative $100 billion, something like that. The bottom 90% of Black America only has between $700 to $800 billion in wealth collectively. That's 13% of the population, right? And that's not even 1% of the whole wealth of the country. Whereas let's juxtapose it to the bottom 90% of white America. They share about 25 trillion. Okay, so that's way more than. If you break it down, the middle Black families were 1,700. So what kind of businesses are we going to start? What kind of if we start a business, if we grind and we work hard, or even if we're in the top 10% of Black America, which has like $2 trillion, right? And even if we're in that group, we still would begging to try to reach. To try to get into contracts where we can get a piece of the American pie with white America. And so what this ruling is saying is those of us who may be in the top 10% still are getting locked out. Look at Byron Allen. So if you're a bootstrapper, you're an aspirational person, if you're a business person and you're a Black person, ADOS person, this ruling is very damaging because it shows you that if Byron Allen, possibly the richest man in America, is having these type of problems, then what does that say
Black
for
man.
you? And what is your recourse? Okay.
Just black
And
man.
yeah. So and let me I want to break down I'm gonna share my screen because I was trying to get to this earlier, but I want to share my screen and I just want to show like some of the what Comcast did as far as to try to do some type of PR. You know, they wanted to say that, well, this nation's civil rights laws have not changed with this ruling. They remain the same as before the case was filed. I say that's a lie because why would you even take it this far if you weren't changing something? You were changing something. You were saying this. So, I mean, technically, you're not necessarily changing the law, but you're changing how the law is going to be interpreted and how it's going to be, how it's going to play out when people try to enforce the law and take it into the judiciary.
And not only that, it's just like anytime this case is being tried, you know, like court cases produce case law, which produces a tradition of adjudication. So like what you said was very important, Josh. The fact that they're caping and fronting like, you know, nothing has changed and that and they made it seem like, you know, they're all for civil rights. Well, what was the point of you challenging it in the first place? Like Byron Allen wasn't the one dragging the Civil Rights Act into the courtroom and into the Supreme Court. It was Comcast doing that. Comcast did that. So like now they're trying to pretend as though, oh, we're all for, you know, civil rights and justice for everybody and nothing has changed and everything that the Civil Rights Act meant before today is still intact. Well, then what was the point of you challenging it all in the first place?
Exactly.
You know,
let me demonstrate.
Yeah,
let me demonstrate to you how they were lying. Right here. This is Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? She said, I'm not going to read all of this, but basically it's saying that, and this is regarding, by the way, if you just want to look up the law and read it for yourself, it's 42 USC section 1981, Civil Rights Act 1866. It says right here, I have previously explained that a strict but-for causation standard is ill-suited to discrimination cases and inconsistent with tort principles. I recognize, however, that our precedent now establishes this form of causation as a default rule in the present context. So, and you can, I'm not going to go on and read further, but just right there, it says, I recognize, however, that our precedent now establishes, that tells you that they changed something. Something has changed now. What changed? It changed the same thing that we said was going to change. It was going to say that the but-for standard is now recognized as that form of causation is recognized as the default rule. So
exactly.
So what that means is saying that the motivating factor was racism doesn't mean anything. And now that you have to make it stick to the but-for that it was 100% racism, that you now, unless you can prove that, your case can't be heard. That's what they're saying. So, and that's for all future cases, not just Byron Allen case. That's for the future cases as well. That's what we got to understand how important and impactful this thing is, because this is for future cases. This is how they determine case law, and they said this is the default. So you know how all you brothers and sisters, you know, y'all might play video games or whatever, you go to the default settings, you get a standard for whatever that criteria may be. And this is the judge's default criteria. This is what they're automatically trying cases standards based upon this specific standard. If it's not 100% racism, we can't hear it.
Yes, sir. And I wanted to read one more piece. And this right here I thought was real telling, and it was a clue to what the next step is. So this is Dean Chemerinsky, who was one of the leading constitutional law professors and lawyers in the country, probably the leading one. And he actually said this right here. He said, I think the battle will now shift to Congress to amend Section 1981 and perhaps other civil rights statutes to allow claims to go forward on showing that race is a motivating factor in the denial of a contract. So basically he's saying, look, it's finished. The Supreme Court, they've ruled against black folks. You know, they've emboldened racism. They've taken us back to a time where, I mean, not completely, but in so many ways, they've taken us back into a time where, you know, it's like 100 years ago or something, you know, or even longer. In the way that they're interpreting the Civil Rights Act, it was not interpreted to be like this. It was not made and put in place to where we can't. It's so ridiculous to have this the standard for us to prove it that we can't even use it. You know, that's basically what it is. So what do we do now? What do we do now? In my opinion, and this is something we talked about, but part of the Black agenda moving forward, this needs to be added right here. We need to make sure that we get this roll back. We need Congress to now counteract this ruling from the Supreme Court and amend Section 1981 so that we can show that, so we can have it to where its motivating factor is actually written in the law. Right now it's ambiguous. It doesn't say that, but we need to get that amended so we can get our protections back in black and white, period.
Now the hurdle in that regard is trying to get it past, like, at least for right now, is trying to get past a Republican-controlled Senate. They're never going to let a bill like that pass. So, you know, this is going to
with the administration that wrote the amicus brief that you know and gave that helped influence the Supreme Court to rule in Comcast.
That's right. So this is going to be an uphill battle. This is going to be an uphill battle.
And this is what Be the Power is about: understanding.
That's right.
Political education, political strategy, and this is why we need Black folks on every side of politics that you can find yourself. We need people on the right and we need people on the left, so that we can further these agendas on every side that we can, and to ensure, you know, mission success. So this is not like the first time this thing has been done. What Josh talked about was important because now it's like a matter of legislation, right? To amend it so that the interpretations of the Supreme Court can't be made as loosely as it's being made now. So the legislation has to be written in such a way that they don't have that much room left or right to move, right? And this has been done before. So this is why the 13th, like, so you had let's bring it all back in. You had the Civil Rights Act of 1866, but that wasn't good enough because you had similar situations like we have now. So the 13th Amendment had to be legislated, put in stone, amend the Constitution of America. So now it's fixed. That language is fixed. So that's like something we're calling for now. We need to amend the Civil Rights Act of 1866, specifically in regards to Section 1981, I believe it is, right? That talks about the economic inclusions and the right to contract for Black people, right? And for the free slaves. That's what we need to have happen. It's a matter of legislation. And when we understand our down ballot policy, our down ballot position for this election, it's not that we're being inactive. It's that we understand that the decisions that are most important for us that are being made are being exercised by the Congress, our state legislatures, and things of that nature. We focus far too much on the executive branch, and we don't look at that legislative branch, and we don't look at that judicial branch. But we need to start laser focus on that legislative branch, because that's the branch that makes law. So we need to start saying, you know what, down ballot this thing. Who is my U.S. senator? Who is my U.S. representative? And are they representing the policies that impact me in a meaningful way that is to my upliftment and my betterment? You know what I mean? Because this is what it's going to take to roll back the judicial decisions that we see and that we've talked about in this broadcast. It's going to be an act of legislation. So,
and let me say this too. I'm gonna let you jump in. I'm gonna be real quick. Like I said, when I first seen this, no doubt. When I first seen this, I was pissed off, man. I was pissed, and I started thinking, you know, when we're doing this thing right, You know, if it wasn't for coronavirus going wild, we should have been rioting and tearing stuff up in the street. I mean, there's no reason why you should be able to take away Black folks' rights that we got coming out of slavery, you know, or at least restrict them to the point where they can't even use the law that was put in place. So, you know, it's just, I mean, we have to do better to become more politically aware as a collective, so that we put so much pressure on when things like this happen, that when this, let's say, Supreme Court come out with this ruling, the same way that, you know, the gays paraded, LGBT community paraded and celebrated so hard when they got favorable rulings and things like that. That's how we need to be doing. When we get favorable rulings, we need to be in the street partying. When we get unfavorable rulings, we need to be in the street rioting. And the legislators, when they know that's going to happen, they will act. They will be under pressure to act quickly to address this. But we got a lot of work to do to make sure our people, you know, care enough or are aware enough to do something about it, to get the attention that will get the attention of our legislators. So, what you gonna say, Ali?
Well, I was going to say that.
Oh, you still in the mute, bro? I can hear you. I can hear you.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. What I was going to say is to the point that where El was talking about in terms of voting down ballot. One of the things that I have been saying early on was that there are a lot of seats up for election in Congress, including the Senate. One of the things I felt like people should have been putting a lot of time and a lot of focus and emphasis on is how people need to try to flip the Senate, maintain control of the House. If you into the whole, like, Democrats have to do it, why not? Why are we not talking about main House and flipping the Senate? About president and Democratic presidents have, and their appointments have shown that it doesn't really help us with this, particularly with this Byron Allen case. So I'm just saying, like, there's 17, according to Ballotopia, there's 17 races as a general election in the general election battlegrounds. Of the 17 seats, 5 have Democratic incumbents and 12 have Republican incumbents heading into the election. Right now, according to the breakdown in the Senate, you have hold on, I'll tell you right now, you have 45 Democrats and 53 Republicans. But we should be looking at that. Like, I don't understand why that's not a topic of conversation. Why is everything all about Trump? You understand? Particularly in light of the fact that we're looking at Congress is the one who passes the legislation. We have this Republican-controlled Senate that will be hard to overcome with regard to amending any legislation. That should be the conversation, in my opinion. What are you guys' thoughts on that? You're muted.
Hold on.
Let's go back. I'm on. Let's go back to Obama, right? Obama was a Democrat. There's always going to be a battle between Democratic policies and Republican policies. Obama's race, right, being a quote unquote Black American, was a tool that was used by right-wing media like Fox News, and I mean, you can name the rest of them, as a way to go at Barack Obama to turn that electorate against him. In essence, when we're talking strictly politics, and this is my interpretation, I could be right, I could be wrong. This is just my interpretation. The battle is between Republicans and Democrats, and the policies that they want to enact, whether it be regulations, non-regulations, et cetera, et cetera. because the greedy don't want regulations, right? And we know that it's political because you look at the way the right attacks Bill Clinton and you look at the way they attack Hillary Clinton till this day. It's not just Barack Obama's name that's mentioned by Trump. All through right-wing media, we see the Clintons' name being brought up. We hear Republicans going at Democratic policies. So what this did was it riled up the base. They knew that they could rile up the white supremacists in this nation, the evangelical Christians, et cetera, et cetera. And Trump stepped in at the right time. But now what's going on is we're still having a battle between Republican and Democratic policies. So our people are being duped into believe, right, that removing Trump is the number one issue. And like my brother Ali Bey just stated, what is the use in removing Trump if we cannot flip the Senate? So the down ballot initiative that ADOS is talking about, in my opinion, is even more important than who's running for president, because we are not getting what we want out of any of these guys anyway. So I believe that that should be the push in those states where Senate seats can be flipped. We make a hard push there. I also believe that due to Bernie Sanders' law, I guess you could say he lost, and Cenk Uygur, who's a progressive on the TYT network running for one of the districts out in California. These are massive losses to the progressive movement and their brand under their form of democratic socialism. I'm also projecting that certain seats of democratic socialists like AOC, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, I believe that their seats in Congress are not even safe at this point right now. So down ballot initiatives, I believe, is something that we need to focus on and we need to put our energy into, because as I've stated, none of these guys are going to give us what we need, which is a quote unquote black agenda. And I don't know what happened to my brother with L. There you go. He's back on a quote unquote black agenda and our reparations so that we can be made whole in this country, period.
Yeah. You know, we had a conversation not too long ago. We were talking about that you can't even, in my opinion, I don't know how you can consider yourself a progressive if you're not for reparations. You know, if you're not for reparations, if you're not for fixing the bottom caste.
Let me say, hold on. I don't want to interrupt you, Josh, but I don't see how you can consider yourself a conservative or a Republican if you're not for reparations, because it was the Republican Party who first exercised and enacted a reparations program. And it was the Republicans, the Republicans of Lincoln, who set up the Freedmen's Bureau. It was Republicans who executed Field Order 15. It was the Republicans who were leading the abolitionist movement. So I don't understand how you call yourself a true Republican and you're not for reparations and you're not for restorative justice for American descendants. I don't understand it.
I don't understand it. I was at the y'all pull up this image right here. Y'all trying to build on this?
No, I just pulled it up just
okay.
That are in play for the Senate.
Yeah, that's important. That's important because we never have this discussion about what's actually up in the Senate, you know, and everything is focused on Joe Biden and the Democrats. And so I just wanted people to see that this is happening as well, you know, and this is very important. It's very important.
Oh yeah, most definitely. You know, I know we can get into some other topics. I know one of the things I've been kind of itching at is to kind of get at certain people, like the Candace Owenses of the world, you know, who and other conservatives who.
Before we get into that, though, I really would like to play this video and just allow the people who may not. There may be people who are watching this show who have never heard Byron Allen speak, who may not even know who he is. And who is this Byron Allen dude that we're talking about? I would like for them to just like check him out, see what he got to say, listen to the brilliance of Byron Allen, and just like take in, like who he is from his own words. So we can start that and get that popping, and y'all can check that out.
This case has been getting a lot of coverage this week. We've heard from Comcast, and I'll read their comment in a minute. But tell me the 1 minute version of what you're alleging.
Real simple. The cable industry, AT&T, DirecTV, Comcast, Time Warner, they spent about $50 billion a year licensing cable networks and advertising, with less than $3 million per year going to 100% African American owned media. Now, what they do is they make token donations to people like Al Sharpton, the NAACP, the Urban League, and after taking those donations, they negotiated a fraudulent MOU that says this is okay for Black people to live by. What America needs to understand is that Al Sharpton does not speak for me. Al Sharpton does not speak for Black people. It's like I ask people, who is the white person who speaks for you? It's racist to even believe that Al Sharpton is the go-to person. Shame on you, Sony, for thinking sit down with Al Sharpton, and that negates your racist emails about President Obama. So it's real simple. These token donations they make to him, as reported in the New York Post, allows them to have racial cover. This is why we're not getting enough advertising or any advertising from McDonald's and Coca-Cola and Chrysler and General Motors and AT&T. They don't spend any money with African American owned media. Something that's very alarming, AT&T spent more money on Al Sharpton's lavish 60th birthday than they spent on Ebony magazine, the biggest African American magazine in America, around 70 years, 10 million readers per month. AT&T spent only $30,000 on that magazine. Walmart has given money to Al Sharpton. Walmart doesn't spend any money in Ebony magazine, and they barely do business with me in a long-term partnership. And I'm constantly going back and forth with Walmart and Chrysler as well. So he
Seems like it was freezing.
It was freezing in bits and pieces, but
Yeah,
hopefully that I don't know how clear it came across on y'all end, but
Oh, yeah, it was clear.
basically,
it was clear. I was just freezing up.
yeah, it was buffering in some points, but I think the message was delivered, and how Byron Allen, for those of you who don't know who he is, was able to present a little bit of what his case was based upon. How these Sony, he mentioned Comcast, he was talking about Chrysler, and how they use these so-called celebrities and these so-called leaders, Black leaders, to present racial cover. So they don't really have to do business with Black, independent, Black-owned media and Black-owned business and Black-owned companies, so long as they do business with these individuals, because that makes it look like they're doing business with us. And I want us to wake up to that reality that just because we see Ciroc doing business with Puff Daddy Combs, that don't mean that Ciroc do business with Black folks. Just because we see, a certain business doing exchanges with Jay-Z, that doesn't mean that they do business with Black folks. They're doing business with individuals. So when we're talking about economic inclusion, we're talking about these corporate conglomerates and giants doing business with all Black folks. We're talking about actually being the power. We're talking about living and making a reality what Martin Luther King was talking about when we have that right. And that's what Byron Allen was really trying to drive home when he was talking about they spent more money on Al Sharpton's birthday than they spent on Ebony Magazine. Ebony Magazine
That
is
was crazy.
one of the largest, if not the largest, Black-owned media productions in this country, and they spent more money with Al Sharpton for his birthday than they did with advertisement ads like for Ebony Magazine. And the money that they spend on advertisements is how these companies make money, and that's what they need. It's the advertisement money that McDonald's and Coca-Cola and Chrysler and Pepsi and all these different multi-billion-dollar corporations spend with these smaller corporations, and allows them to even actually grow and be able to get that traffic from these larger corporations and include themselves in the bigger American dream of economic enterprise and freedom. So
Facts.
pay attention to Byron Allen, y'all.
Yeah, I want to say.
And I would say pay attention to Diddy too, because Diddy supports what Byron Allen's position is here as somebody who was actually involved in this whole Comcast situation with his Revolt network. So you're talking about somebody who is an insider. This is not just Byron Allen. It's also Diddy, the woman who was also a person who worked at Comcast and has the Africa network. I believe it's called the Africa network, Josh, right?
Yeah, the Africa channel.
And so Diddy's statement, if we don't have to read it now because I know we want to kind of wrap this up, but Diddy's statement is in support of Byron Allen's position. So I think people need to read that and understand that Diddy has in this particular issue, in this particular matter, with Comcast is on Byron Allen's side, and he's discussing the limitations of his position, even as a quote unquote network owner of Revolt. So I think people should pull his statement up and read that and understand that it's not just Byron Allen. I saw somebody else make a comment that Byron Allen set Black people back 100 years by pushing this case. I think that's foolishness. I think people really need to educate themselves on what's going on. And where you touched on that a little bit earlier, that it's really Comcast who's taking this case to the Supreme Court. They're the ones challenging the 1866 Civil Rights Act. It's not Byron Allen doing it.
Exactly, and that's facts, and that's why I think us having this conversation is ultimately important, just to discuss this thing, because a lot of statements are being made like that out of the lack of awareness of what's going on. So they think that Byron Allen, because his name is being mentioned and Comcast is hiding behind a corporate entity, you don't know any individual that's actually one of the players. That so the blame gets put on Byron Allen, right? Because Comcast is an entity, it's a logo. It's like, oh, Comcast. But Byron Allen is an individual. So they put the blame on Byron Allen. Like, so whatever fallback and whatever negative impact becomes of this decision, it gets blamed on Byron Allen, right?
Because we start blaming ourselves like we always do. Because
we blame ourselves. You know what I'm saying? So like they don't know what's going on. They don't understand. They haven't been following what's been going on with this case, and they don't understand that it wasn't Byron Allen who drugged the Civil Rights Act of 1866 into the courtroom and challenged it. Why would he do that? Byron Allen didn't challenge it. It was Comcast who challenged it. It was Comcast who drugged the Civil Rights Act and is trying to eviscerate it, not Byron Allen.
That, Byron Allen said, I'm trying to settle. Like, come on, let's do a deal. Comcast says we don't negotiate with terrorists.
Exactly. You know? That's what they said.
After years of trying to do business with them, and he will send white salespeople and then all this kind of stuff, and they just wouldn't do deals. So he knew it was racism. I'm sure he has documented cases of to show the racism there. And what are you supposed to do? He sued. He got a favorable judgment for his case to move forward. They didn't like that. They appealed. He won again. They appealed to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is not even hearing his case. They're just hearing the one little piece on the Civil Rights Act of 1866. And of course, they ruled against it. So now, how you going to blame that on him?
I apologize, brother, but I got to stop you. We have to. I'm glad Abby pulled it up. We have to go to this because we have to deal with these type of comments and this type of sentiment in our community. It says so-called Black people need to stop valuing other people's ideas. We are the true majority if we spend over 600 billion a year on products. No minority group can do that if don't have enough people. So you missed the show last night, right? Because we bust that we bust that myth up, right?
We destroyed that myth.
We destroyed that myth last night. And I don't want to insult you, whoever Jaha H is, but it's just and this is just really a evidence and a testament to how we look at wealth and don't really understand what we're looking at. That 600 billion you're looking at is nothing. That 600 billion you're looking at is a drop in the ocean of wealth that is held by white folks in this country. So what you're looking at as power is really, as eloquently as it was put last night by my brother Ali, is insignificant. That 600 billion is insignificant, brother. There's 300 trillion. Well, 3 trillion, not 300. There's $3 trillion of wealth held by white families in this country. 600 billion does not even vibrate or even become recognizable in the face of 3 trillion. 3 trillion is gargantuan in proportions when we talk about 600 billion. And 600 billion can't really be looked at as power because we're talking about things that we're spending that money on that are essential to life. We're not talking about that money's not invested into assets or appreciable assets like land, property, business enterprise, and things of that nature. Most of that billion is being spent on essential ways of life: toilet paper, toothpaste, gas to get back and forth, your rent, your bills. Like, we don't take into account what that 600 billion out of the 40 million Black families that's being spent on. So we keep throwing that around, and then when we look, thanks to great economists like Dr. Sandy Darity, Antonio Moore, political analysts like Yvette Carnell, we understand where that money is going. We looked at this wealth data that came down, that micro data from the Federal Reserve. We looked at that and we know what the Black family is worth. So we know when we talk about all of this spending power that the Black family has, that really don't exist. I know my brother's got something to say on that, man. So go ahead, yo.
I mean, I'm not really, we touched on that last night, but I do want to say that there's going to always be these types of comments every show that we do. And, you know, I understand why the brothers and sisters at ADOS, when they're doing their shows, they lead off and they keep interweaving and folding in the data and the numbers, because hopefully a person like that will hear it and not make false assertions like that. And we can't say that it's tiring because everybody doesn't know, right? And it's our job to be on this platform to help educate. But you missed the show last night, Jaha H. Go look on the channel. Click subscribe, matter of fact. Everybody that's listening in, go to the Be the Power YouTube channel. Click subscribe. We're going to be setting up a Patreon channel soon. And click like. Please click like. And when you hit subscribe, hit the little bell next to it. We're going to wrap up tonight's show. We wanted to bring people a understanding from our understanding of what's going on with this Comcast case, how important it is, and how the Supreme Court just set a new standard, which says that if a company wants to discriminate against you, they can, because you'll never be able to prove it anyway, you know. And I'm not going to respond to that. We're going to leave it.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing, because I can't let him go away like that. Look, this is what I want you to Google. I'm gonna share my screen one more time. I want you to Google this, because it's gonna get you right. All right. Let me just share this entire screen. Just go to Google and type in Sandy Darity. What we get wrong about closing the racial wealth gap.
And
Vital.
I'm glad you
Vital.
brought that up.
That's
Real
vital.
quick. I'm glad you brought that up because the person Jaha H says in the chat, black people don't save money like Europeans do.
That's
And
not
in
true.
this particular book, this PDF, the leading economists in the United States of America, I doubt that you're one. I doubt it. I don't know. Say that we as
Go
a
to it,
people
Josh.
actually save more than they do. We
Go
save
to that
more
part.
than European Americans or the people called white in America do. So he's the Jaha H person is asking for the proof,
Yeah.
and
It's in
you
here.
know
It's right here. All the proof is in here.
Yeah. We're not
Yeah,
those people that just say stuff. We're the wrong crew. We're the wrong cast to say, where's your proof? That's what we do. We are the show and prove crew. We don't talk about
that is
stuff we don't know about. And if we don't know about it, we'll let you know that we don't know about it. So go ahead and go in on that.
Here it goes right here. Black people saving more will close the racial wealth gap. And
now these are the top economists here. That's Go back to that title real quick, Josh, so Jaha H can see that.
Oh, okay. All right. Hold on.
Myth 4. Black people saving more will close the racial wealth gap. And in that particular chapter, the economists go on to say that we actually save more than they do. And regardless if we save more than they did or
let me read the first, paragraph.
Read.
The finding advanced in peer-reviewed articles in economic journals is clear. There is no evidence that Black Americans have a lower savings rate than white Americans once household income is taken into account. For example, Maury Gittleman and Edward Wolf, using data from the panel study on income dynamics, tracked the financial position of Black and white families and found that once income is controlled, if anything, Black families actually have a slightly higher savings rate than their white counterparts. The mild savings rate advantage is indicative of even greater thriftiness amongst Blacks, since they typically have more kin obligations to assist low-income relatives, which further reduces their ability to save. If anything, it appears that Blacks have that Blacks generally live more frugal lives than whites. Okay, it says a study conducted by the Institute of Assets and Social Policy using the 2013 Survey of Consumer Finances found that at comparable levels of income, whites spend 1.3 times more than Blacks. So we can go in and then he breaks down the tropes of Ronald Reagan's welfare queen, and a lot of times we don't
3 times more than Blacks, right?
Yeah,
because they keep saying we spend more than everybody else. And it's just
how do we spend more when we have less? So this is something that it makes no sense. How do we spend more when we have less money and wealth and less population? Why do y'all repeat such foolishness?
Please do research.
Yeah, right here, man. I mean, this breaks down the trope. It says the belief was magnified. It's nonetheless conventional wisdom has it that Blacks in search of immediate gratification lack self-control and are plagued uniquely by a culture of frivolous consumerism. This belief was magnified by Ronald Reagan's use of the welfare queen trope during his campaign, and recently via internet financial gurus pushing images of Black America spending money on Jordan brand Nike shoes rather than household needs. Yet the empirical evidence indicates that it has not been the case historically, nor is it the case today, that Blacks are more financially wasteful than whites. In addition, economists ranging from arch conservative Milton Friedman to Marjorie Galenson, blah, 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 a founder of the caucus of Black economists, all found that Blacks have a slightly higher savings rate than whites. I mean, we can go in. See, what we gotta stop doing. We gotta stop repeating the talking points of the racists who are crafting policy to put us in the position that we're in the first place. So we got to understand that Richard Nixon is the one who came up with Black capitalism. So we stop asking for reparations and we stopped. We it would make us feel like we were getting a government handout. Negroes, y'all don't want a government handout. Do for self. No, everybody else getting handouts. We want ours too. You didn't kill King. You didn't kill Malcolm X. You didn't kill everybody else and put them in everybody else in jail. So we scared. We can't fight. So then you use social engineering to make us believe that the government actually giving us what we're owed is a handout, and we don't need to get.
That's it. That's it right there. They socially engineered and reframed the paradigm from after killing the leaders who were leading this pursuit of justice from a debt to a handout. How diabolical is that? They made us look at the debt that's owed to us as an actual handout, and that we're begging for something we don't deserve.
Now we're running around repeating that. Brother Ali, can you respond to this comment on the screen? And after that, we're going to close it out.
So if you believe that is true, then how is it that black people can't pull together to fix their own financial problems? Somebody's lying. Well, I think the brothers actually just explained it. To be honest with you, if you were, if whoever this is was listening to what they're saying, they just explained it. I mean, you're talking about, Josh, can you put that graph up again? Because maybe he didn't see it. I think sometimes, like, I don't know, you know what I mean?
Hold on.
And then Josh, when you put up the graph,
which one?
Tell them with the pie chart.
Okay, I got
it. Tell them the source of that information so that they don't think that this is just something that you made. Like, who is the source of this? Where does this information come from?
This is the Survey of Consumer Finance.
Survey of Consumer Finance, right? So at the end of the day, these are the people responsible for giving you this information. This is not coming from us. This is not coming from us. Look, the red represents the wealth position of blacks in America. This is not just ADOS. This is all blacks, including the Nigerians, including the Caribbean immigrants.
That's right.
This is everybody. All of us together. This whole 14% of the population represented by that little red insignificant piece compared to the blue piece that represents white America. I don't understand what you're I don't understand the question. The money
Let me just say this real quick. Go ahead.
You're comparing $3 trillion with the $100 trillion and saying that we have some sort of spending power. It makes no sense, and I'm hoping that whoever this is, male or female, we don't know, that they go back, watch the video from last night, go to ADOS101.com, see some of the statistics that are broken down, because this way of thinking is keeping us back. It's not moving us forward by telling us that we're the liars when all we're doing is presenting the data, and you're just posting opinions in the comment section on YouTube. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Another thing I want to, I mean, we broke down last night why, people want to compare it to other immigrant groups and how they have a different background. A lot of times they come over with wealth, or they come over as not being a bottom caste. They don't have that stigma. They get money in programs for the government, all that kind of stuff. And we get nothing. We got nothing historically. And we carry on the albatross of dealing with the burden of slavery. We already dealt with that.
Absolutely.
But here's one thing that people are missing, right? We said that we're talking about pooling our finances together to be for our collective uplift. While that is good and that has a place, but when you're dealing with the group that only has less than 3% of the wealth, and 90% of the group only has less than 1% of the wealth, like, the whole thing has to be about how can we take money from the 90%? How do we take some from the 100 trillion and get it over to the 3 trillion? It can't be anything about, well, how do we take and make money within the 3 trillion to think we can add from the 3 trillion? That math doesn't make any sense. You got to take from the 100 trillion. And then how you pull money together when you look at this right here and you say your whole life is worth $3,500 in DC. Your whole life is worth $8 in Boston. I'm sorry, if you get 100,000 people together, which you would never do, and they put their whole life together, you still got 800,000. But then they can't even buy oodles and noodles. So where
to respond to this, what I have on the screen, because obviously this person doesn't care about the graphs. He said, look at I want to read it. Anybody can form a graph, right? So forget the numbers, because this person's opinion obviously means more than the numbers, right? Anybody can form a graph, but it doesn't match none of the poor communities that I see. Well, the graph shows you the sliver of wealth that we have. So I don't understand what you're looking at or what you're not looking at. You're blinding yourself to the information. That's called obstinacy.
Yo, so what we have here, right?
He froze up, bro.
Yeah, I don't think this brother or this person, whoever it is, understands what that graph is saying.
And they're not trying to understand, so it's no need to even keep wasting time on them.
Right.
Yeah, I think this is something that a lot of people have. It's a lot of people that think like this. I mean, it's unfortunate, but so just, what I would say is, we trying to give you the keys. We giving you the keys. The keys. Go look up that report. What we get wrong about closing the racial wealth gap. Subscribe to Tone Talks on YouTube. Subscribe to Breaking Brown on YouTube. Watch some of the videos. There's a book that we're reading. We're gonna have a discussion on. I know we've been talking about. Ali mentioned the book last night, but Yvette's gonna have a show on it on Thursday called "The Color of Money." It's called "The Color of Money" by Mirza Baradarian. However you pronounce her name.
Mirza Baradarian. And what she says while you on her, I'm going to say this real quick. This whole thing about pooling our resources and bootstrapping, that's not how anybody else in this country got to where they are. We're the only people that talk that kind of talk. That's not how any of the other immigrants, the Italian immigrants, that's not what happened. These people all had government undergirding, man. All of these people had government help. We're the only ones that are always put in the position of, you need to fix your own self. Meanwhile, they take our tax dollars to fix everything and everybody else. That's foolishness.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, with that said, Brother Grayella, do you have anything else you want to add on? And we can end this stream. I kind of wanted to keep it within the hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean those comments are good. I mean, because, and this is not a direct shot at the brother or sister or whoever. This is just to, this is something that we just need to learn better from. We have to awaken all of our people. So I mean, some of us may have been at that position at some period of time until we learn better. So what we're trying to tell you is just take what we're saying and go and research it. You want to go and add and follow certain people on Twitter. But bottom line is, your situation is not going to be improved. Our situation is not going to be improved by us doing something for ourselves. We didn't put ourselves in this position. And I take that back. What we can do for ourselves is fight for ourselves. We can fight to become the power. That's what this whole thing is about, being the power. And being the power, the Supreme Court, they tried to gut our power, right? Racists have stripped a lot of our economic power through the years. But the last power that we have is the power, the people power through the vote. So, but if all people just give Joe Biden and people like them the vote forever, with no demands, then we've given up our power. So what we're trying to say is, get politically aware, understand what your economic position is, what your the condition is your people are, and you need to be demanding that your elected officials give you an agenda that gives us what we're owed, and even beyond that, because that's the only power we got left. We ain't got economic power. And what you gonna do? Like Nas said, my father was not a banker, neither was my neighbor. When it came to getting paper, who the hell was gonna train us? Not only that, even they train us. Capitalism without capital is dead.
That's a fact.
I want to leave it with that.
Sister Twilla Muhammad said, "That's all you see in the hood is deck." In response to Jaha H's response, excellent response. And with that said, we're going to close out this particular live stream. It's your brother, your host, Naheem. Be the Power. We're going to be trying to come on. You know, we have some set days. We weren't supposed to come on tonight, but when the news came out about that Byron Allen case, we had to come on and we had to represent. So I'm going to urge people to go back and look up Byron Allen's case. I want everybody to start at the genesis of this thing because it goes back some years, and I want you to understand where we're at right now and why the Civil Rights Act of 1866 is so important. Anybody in the Moorish movement that follow any of my videos and my old radio show knows that I used to bring up the 1866 Act a lot because it was the act that abolished, if you will, the Supreme Court's case in Dred Scott. It essentially reversed it. And anybody can look that up. The 1866 Act of, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 reversed the ruling of Dred Scott. This is another reason why this act is so important to us. And now the Supreme Court just basically gutted that act. So this may have some larger implications that we don't even understand in the moment right now. And I actually look forward to the legal scholar's opinion on this particular case. And I want to leave you all with the motto of BTP, Be the Power. And that is, don't just fight the power, become the power, and then you'll have the power to make a change. And with that, I say peace.
Peace.